Welcome back to our channel. Ready to develop your artistry further? Keep watching for a step-by-step guide on how to make this delightful flower arrangement and learn everything you need to know about using real brush pens. To create this artwork, you'll need a pen for sketching your artwork, a palette for mixing and blending colors, real brush pens to make the designs, glass of water for moistening your paintbrush. When working with watercolors, you should always start with light colors. It's better to work on details and dark areas at the very end. To soften the edges of the petals and create naturally uneven shapes, just like those on real flowers, we'll be using a wet ink on wet paper technique with a small paintbrush as well as the real brush pens. Let's start by painting the roses. Use a clean, damp paintbrush to draw a circle and make a few strokes inside of it. If you want the flowers to look light and airy, make sure you use plenty of water. When you start adding colors, the damp paper will cause the colors to spread, making them soft with subtle gradients. Start filling in the flower with the lightest shades. Add darker colors to the center of the rose. Watch as the colors spread for an eye-catching effect while emphasizing the flower's center. Next, create more volume in the flower by adding darker shades, especially on the edges of the petals. Apply a wet brush where you feel necessary. It'll make the transitions between the edges smoother. Are you a newbie? Don't worry about using a lot of colors. Start with two, like a light pink and a dark contrasting violet for the middle of the flower. If you choose to use more colors, make things easier by preparing your palette in advance and sorting the colors into groups according to the objects in the painting. Use real brush pens to finish the petals' edges to make them look more defined. Real brushes are great for watercolor techniques and stylized illustrations. A flexible brush tip and vibrant water-based ink make drawing a breeze. You can apply color directly to dry paper and blend it. Or create a palette with your colors and use whatever size brush you need. Paint the rosebuds following the same steps. But instead of making large circles, draw small ovals. While the area is wet, switch to a paintbrush with a darker shade and pull the color up to define the overlapping petals of the rosebud. This way, you'll achieve a smooth transition of color on the petals. The bottom of the flower will be more rich in color, and the top will look softer, like how a real flower looks. The rose at the bottom of the painting is drawn differently from those at the top because of foreshortening. We darken the lower parts of this flower while the upper parts remain light to add a feeling of depth. The middle is drawn the same as the others. Use varying shades of green to add the stems and leaves. Brush pens are ink-based markers that have bristle tips as opposed to felt, chisel, or sponges. They contain water-based ink that is released as the tip touches the painting surface, allowing the artist to achieve watercolor effects without the typical setup of watercolor paint tubes, half pans, water cups, etc. With real brush pens, you're not limited to one style of creating. You can use them for drawing, painting, and calligraphy. The flexible nylon brush tip allows you to apply a variety of brush strokes, from details to larger washes of color. Use them wet or dry and add water to make beautiful watercolor effects. Get your set and enjoy free shipping on all orders. Now we'll create the peonies. For the peonies, we'll be following the same steps as the roses, this time using shades of blue and violet and adding stamens inside the flower. The peonies will be half open, so the bottom of the flower will be darker than the top. Remember to consider the position of the flower and if it will be behind or in front of the surrounding flowers. If the flower is behind the others, it'll be darker. To give the painting more depth so it appears more realistic, we add shadows to the flowers that overlap. After drawing the petals, use your real brush pens to add the stamens in the middle of the flower. Use a wet brush to blur them a little and make them more natural looking. If you're enjoying this tutorial, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more step-by-step guides, time lapses, and painting process videos. Let's move on to the anemones. These flowers have several overlapping petals. As you draw each petal, notice where it falls in relation to the others. Does it fall on top or underneath the other petals? Note that the lower anemone petals are larger than the upper ones. Draw all the anemone petals, alternating between the real brush pens and the paintbrush as you fill them in. The area of the petal that is closest to the center is the darkest area of the petal, while the area of the petal farthest away from the center is the lightest area. When filling in the entire petal, use the darkest and lightest shades as a guide to create a gradient that'll make the flower petals look natural. To add realism to our portrait, we draw lines on the petals to create the texture of a crumpled flower. Since this flower is in the middle of the painting, it attracts the most attention, so we gave it more contrast. Define the edges of the petals and use the wet paintbrush to soften them slightly. Use the real brush pens in the darker shades to paint the center of the anemones and add the stamens. Use lighter shades to draw lines on the petals and create texture to make the petals appear more realistic. We add a second peony flower to finish the painting. To make the middle anemone stand out, we use lighter tones on the one behind it. Now it's time to paint the petals. There are 4 types of petals in this painting. You can either draw them with a paintbrush or a brush pen. If you're using a paintbrush, you'll need to choose a color from your palette and apply it with a wet brush on dry paper. Painting with a dry brush will prevent the petals' edges from blurring. To draw teardrop-shaped petals, we press the brush to the paper and move it downwards while gradually decreasing the pressure. After applying the main color, add a second contrasting color like red or emerald, depending on the type of petal painted. You can apply the contrasting color with real brush pens or a paintbrush, but note that there will be less of a contrast between colors if you use a paintbrush. To add the finishing touches to this painting, we add details like leaves and additional petals. This is where you can let your imagination run wild. Just make sure to use contrasting colors to give your composition harmony and make your art more captivating. You can also draw petals with real brush pens. In this case, there will be a large contrast between light and dark colors. It's better to add additional colors with real brush pens and smooth the gradient with a wet brush. If you use your real brushes on dry paper, the colors will be bright and saturated. To achieve the soft look of a watercolor painting, apply the ink on a palette. This helps you regulate the color's saturation. Try drawing on wet paper or in layers. To paint in layers, first paint one layer, let it dry, and then paint the next. We recommend using a small round brush for painting in layers. Don't forget about shadows and highlights. The biggest shadows will be where the petals overlap and will help define their edges. If you have any questions about how to use real brush pens, please let us know. We'll be happy to answer them in the comments. There you have it! You've made a beautiful bouquet of flowers! Thank you for watching this tutorial. We hope that you enjoyed it. If you'd like to read this step-by-step guide, check out our blog post.